I'm going to actually take a different look at the telemedicine solution from what the earlier presenter talked about. I'm going to talk about more from the implementation perspective rather than looking at only the technology piece. But first, let me tell you a little bit of a story. This was told to me by a doctor a few years ago. Late one night, he got a call from a village. There was a pregnant woman having complications in the delivery. And he realized after talking to the family that this woman is not going to survive. And the options before him were whether he should get the woman to the hospital and start the treatment or let her die there. He chose to let her die in the family, with the family, and there was no other alternative in front of him. There are many such stories that happen all over the country. Dr. Kanav has already mentioned few statistics about how poor the healthcare infrastructure is in the rural areas. There's one more statistic here where the rural patients actually spend more than the urban patients on accessing healthcare. And the overhead is because of the travel expenses. It's also because of the loss of wages that they have to forego. There has to be somebody accompanying them to go to the town. They also lose wages. And then if there is some lab test prescribed, then there is additional stay, additional expense. So all this becomes a lot of extra expense compared to what an urban patient like you or me would actually incur. And the rural patients actually, they can spend money, but they don't get the care in the villages. So we started looking at this problem, whether technology can bridge that gap between the rural patients and the urban doctors. The few initial challenges that we had were poor connectivity. There is limited skill set in the villages. And of course, the device that has to work there has to be rugged enough to work even when it is exposed to the elements. What we created was ReMeDi, Remote Medical Diagnostics. It is a medical device which has multiple diagnostic parameters on it. There's ECG, blood pressure, temperature, stethoscope, pulse oximeter, and of course a software application which included a video conference that works at a very low bandwidth, as low as 32 kilobits per second. We can do video, audio, and real-time data transfer. There is a patient medical record available on the server on the cloud, and which is accessible from anywhere by any doctor at any point of time. As there was also a discussion earlier, so affordable does not mean low quality. There were definitely questions about how accurate the measurements are, and we have undergone multiple clinical validations at various hospitals, reputed hospitals, to make sure that the device is accurate. The measurements are as close to the standard equipment that the doctors use as possible. Of course, it should be safe to use. When you hook up a patient onto this device, they should not get an electric shock. And of course, the certification with the various bodies in India, so like CE certification that has undergone the various tests for certification. In fact, once we were doing a demonstration to a doctor, and he measured his own blood pressure, and it showed up a high reading with the ReMeDi. And the doctor summoned a sphygmomanometer immediately and found that the reading was actually correct, and he had to start his own treatment for hypertension. After the initial trials, we first deployed it in a village in Tiruvallur, that's in Tamil Nadu, about 40 kilometers from Chennai. What we found was for about a week there were multiple patients, but then the patients stopped coming to the center. And on probing further, we found that the consultation was good. They were happy about having talked to a doctor, but the consultation or the treatment was not complete because they were not getting medicines out there. So what we realized was that technology is only part of the solution. The healthcare ecosystem has to be present for completing the care of the patient. So medicines have to be brought in, more diagnostics may have to be brought in. If a patient requires a referral, so they have to be able to go to a doctor, see a doctor in person. Until then, the patient's care is not complete. And we also found, there's another learning was that when we deployed it at something called internet kiosks, which were providing various other services like education, agriculture, veterinary care. So they were not really gelling well with certain services. For example, a center providing land record services. So you see the kind of crowd that will come to the center, and women especially will be reluctant to go to those centers. Another case, the center was located at in a marketplace, but happened to be next to a liquor shop. So again, women and children were not coming to the center for healthcare services. You talked about Madhubani. This is a picture from there. There's a village called Basaitha, which is about 30 kilometers from Madhubani town. And one cannot imagine how long it will take. It used to take us about 3 hours by bus to reach that place. And during winters, this was some time back, the security situation was supposed to be scary in Bihar at that time. And the last bus used to leave at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because by the time it gets dark, you have to reach the Madhubani town. It is really poor infrastructure. And we were really happy that if we were able to deploy a solution there, the kind of service that it will provide to the population living in those remote locations. There was another experience we had. One of our support engineers and I were actually handling a support call, and this gentleman, he refused to let us leave from that place until we gave him the administrator password to the computer. And after a lot of back and forth for about a couple of hours, he let us leave, and we didn't have to share the password with him, but it was a scary thought. So today the solution has actually evolved into a multifaceted solution. There are various components to the application. There are doctors, doctor clients, the village health center, pharmacies, health workers, mobile health workers, hospitals and diagnostic labs. All of this combines to create the healthcare ecosystem that we talked about. So as I mentioned, the service delivery is very, very important. This is the service delivery network of one of our largest partners. That's World Health Partners. It's an NGO based in Delhi. And they ensure that the service delivery is complete and it's not left at just the consultation. This is one of their centers in Bihar. They go by the brand name of Sky Health Center. This is a small video from World Health Partners.
Patients can also visit a Sky Health Center directly. Each center uses the latest advances in satellite and communication technology. Every Sky Health Center is owned by a woman entrepreneur who works with her male partner, usually her husband. The couple set up the center with their own investment and at times with a loan from WHP. Though the education levels of the owners are low, the training that WHP provides gets them competent enough to register the patient and create an electronic medical record. Upon registration, the central facility takes over and a team of counselors and doctors attends to the patient. The doctor is able to get vital signs like pulse and blood pressure and use instruments like stethoscope and cardiogram through the system and write a prescription. For female patients wanting to discuss confidential details, the project ensures that the counselors and doctors attending to them are always women.
देखिए बिना जांच के हम कुछ बोल नहीं सकते तो बिजनौर में जो एमडी गायनेकोलॉजिस्ट होंगे तो उनको आप एक बार दिखा दीजिए उनको.
Once consulted, the patients or their attendants can buy the medicines from a nearby pharmacy. The project maintains a strong supply chain and sells generic medicines under the brand name Sky Meds that often cost 20% of the branded products of similar quality. The project also markets subsidized family planning products. The doctor has prescribed some tests for Amarpal's wife, Kamlesh. She, however, does not have to travel to the big towns where the diagnostic centers are. Instead, a sample collector visits the Sky Health Center once a week on a predetermined schedule. Reports are delivered electronically to doctors at WHP's Central Medical Facility. So, on follow-up visits, Kamlesh will find her test reports already available with her doctor, who can now improve the diagnosis and treatment. Rural and low-income patients like her thus no longer need to make repeated visits to town for tests or report collection.
So there are similar many centers with many other partners. We have close to about 800 odd centers today in the country. These are all located at very rural locations, population of about 5,000 or so, catering to about 10 villages in the surrounding areas. There are a few examples here. So this young boy showed up with some skin infection. The doctors could see the video on using a webcam and then prescribe some ointment and medication. This is a camp organized by one of the army units in Tripura, where this old man, about 96 years old, showed up at at the camp and could talk to a doctor sitting in Delhi. There's another gentleman. This is in Tirupattur in Tamil Nadu again. He was reported with chest pain, and the ECG was taken, and then he was prescribed some medication and asked to see a doctor in person for further treatment. This old woman, she again in a village called Tirukolakudi in Tirupattur in Tamil Nadu. She had a broken arm actually, and the doctor could see on the video that there is some problem, and she was not aware of what the problem is, and she was asked to come to the town where the doctor treated her problem. I happened to visit Tirukolakudi after a few days of her treatment, and all she could say, she placed both her hands on my head, and all she could mumble was Nandri, which means thank you in Tamil. So that made my day and showed that the wonderful team at Neurosynaptic are able to actually carry out the dream that we started with. That's the number of consultation days, paid consultation days that we have had so far. We are happy to have achieved this milestone. Thank you so much.